The evening was quiet in the small town. The streets were almost empty, and the cold wind carried dry leaves across the road. Emma had just returned from her late shift at the cafe. She was tired, her feet ached, and all she wanted was a hot shower and some rest. But as she walked toward her old apartment building, something caught her eyes. At the corner, near the steps of her building, sat a man. His clothes were torn, his coat too thin for the weather, and his shoes had holes in them. His face was covered with a rough beard, his hair messy, and his hands trembled from the cold. At first, Emma thought he was just another homeless man passing through. In her neighborhood, it wasn't unusual to see people in need. Most people walked past quickly, pretending not to notice. But this man was different. He wasn't asking for money, he wasn't calling out for food. He just sat there quietly, his back leaning against the wall, staring down at the ground. There was something about his eyes when he briefly looked up. Tired, yes, but not hopeless. His gaze was sharp, almost like someone who had seen too much of life and carried heavy secrets. Emma slowed her steps. For a moment, she hesitated. Her neighbors had always warned her not to get involved with strangers. "It's dangerous," they said. "People take advantage of kindness." But her heart pulled her in another direction. She knew what loneliness felt like, and she couldn't walk inside pretending he wasn't there. Are you okay, sir?" she asked gently. The man lifted his head slowly. His voice was low but clear. "I'll be fine. Don't worry about me." That answer only made her more curious. Most homeless people she had met would ask for something, even a little food. But this man didn't. He looked as if he was forcing himself to be invisible. Emma bit her lip, unsure of what to do. She could easily walk inside, close the door, and forget. But she couldn't. Not tonight. "Have you eaten anything?" she asked again. There was a pause. Then, very quietly, he admitted, "Not today." Emma felt a pull in her chest. Without thinking too much, she said, "Wait here. I'll bring you something." Inside her apartment, she heated a bowl of soup and found some bread. She carried it outside carefully. The man tried to refuse at first. "You don't have to," he said. "I don't want to trouble you." "It's no trouble," Emma insisted. "Please, eat." He accepted it finally, his hands shaking as he held the bowl. But even in that moment, he thanked her with a quiet dignity that surprised her. "You're kind. Thank you." Emma stood there for a while, watching him eat. The way he held the spoon, the way he sat, there was something different about him. He didn't eat like someone who had lived on the streets for years. He ate slowly, politely, almost carefully. "Do you live around here?" she asked. He shook his head. "No. Just passing through." She wanted to ask more, but the look in his eyes told her he didn't want to talk about it. Respecting that, she stayed silent. After he finished the food, she handed him an old blanket she kept in her closet. "It gets colder at night," she said softly. Again, he resisted. "You've already done enough." "Take it," Emma said firmly. "I insist." For a long second, he stared at her, as if trying to understand why she was helping him. Then he finally took the blanket. "You shouldn't trust strangers so easily," he said in a calm but serious voice. Emma gave a small smile. "Maybe. But sometimes strangers just need a little kindness." She went inside after that, but sleep didn't come quickly. Lying in bed, she kept thinking about the man outside. Who was he? Why did he seem so different? Why was there a shadow of sadness and yet strength in his eyes? In her heart, Emma knew this wasn't the last time she would see him. Something about that stranger at her door was unusual, something she couldn't explain yet. But one thing was certain, her life was about to change in ways she could never imagine. The next morning, Emma woke up early. Her first thought was of the man outside. She wondered if he was still there, or if he had moved on during the night. Quietly, she peeked through her window. To her surprise, he was still sitting by the steps, wrapped in the blanket she had given him. He looked tired but calm, as if he had been awake most of the night. Emma made herself some tea, then hesitated. Should she offer him breakfast too? Part of her wanted to ignore it, to avoid getting too involved. But another part of her, stronger and louder, told her that he needed help. So she prepared some eggs and bread, placed them on a plate, and carried it outside. "You didn't have to," the man said when she offered it. His voice was soft but carried a weight, almost as if every word cost him effort. "I wanted to," Emma replied simply. "You can't survive on nothing." He accepted the food this time without protest. He ate slowly, carefully, like someone who hadn't eaten a proper meal in a long time. Emma noticed again how polite he was, how clean his movements were despite his rough appearance. Most people who had lived on the streets developed harsh manners from survival, but this man carried himself differently. "What's your name?" she asked after a pause. He looked up at her, his eyes sharp yet unreadable. "Daniel," he said finally. "Daniel," Emma repeated, testing the name. It suited him somehow, strong, simple, but with a quiet depth. "I'm Emma." He gave a small nod. "Thank you, Emma." She sat down on the step near him. The silence between them wasn't awkward. Instead, it felt strange, like the calm before a storm. She studied him closely. His face was rough, but underneath the beard and tired lines, she could see he had once been a handsome man. His voice was steady, not weak like most people who struggled on the streets. And his eyes were full of intelligence, always observing, always thinking. Emma's curiosity grew stronger. "How long have you been out here?" she asked. Daniel gave a faint smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Long enough." That answer only deepened the mystery. He wasn't telling her much, but the way he avoided her questions made her believe he was hiding something. Later that day, Emma left for her shift at the cafe. She kept thinking about him the whole time. Her friends at work noticed her distraction, but she didn't tell them why. Something inside her warned that people wouldn't understand. They would tell her she was being foolish, that helping a homeless stranger was dangerous. Yet, when she remembered his calm manners and quiet dignity, she couldn't see him as a threat. When she returned home that evening, Daniel was still there. This time, he stood up when he saw her. "You shouldn't give me food again," he said firmly. "I don't want to be a burden." Emma shook her head. "You're not a burden. You just need some help." His eyes studied her for a moment, as though he was trying to measure her sincerity. Finally, he sighed and followed her inside when she invited him. Inside the apartment, Daniel looked around carefully. He didn't stare greedily like someone desperate. Instead, he observed everything with calm eyes, as if studying her life in silence. He noticed the small bookshelf, the neatly arranged dishes, the faded but clean curtains. "Sit," Emma said, pointing to the chair. Daniel sat down, his posture surprisingly straight, his movements almost refined. Emma frowned. Something about the way he held himself felt out of place. He didn't look like a man who had lived rough on the streets for years. As they ate dinner together, she tried to ask simple questions. "Do you have family?" His fork froze for a second before he lowered it. "Not anymore." "I'm sorry," Emma said softly. He nodded once, as though he was used to that kind of sympathy. Later, when Emma went to wash the dishes, she noticed Daniel carefully folding the napkin he had used. Not crumpling, not tossing, folding. It was such a small detail, but it made her pause. Who does that? She wondered. As the night grew late, Emma brought out a spare blanket and offered him her couch. He protested again, saying he could sleep outside, but she insisted. "The couch is not much, but it's better than the cold street," she said firmly. Daniel finally agreed. Before lying down, he looked at her with eyes that seemed to carry both gratitude and warning. "You're too kind, Emma. But kindness can be dangerous." His words echoed in her head as she went to her room. Why would he say that? Who was this man who spoke like he carried the weight of a hidden life? That night, Emma couldn't sleep easily. She kept wondering about the mysterious guest now sleeping in her living room. He wasn't like other people she had helped before. There was something more, something she couldn't see yet but could feel in her bones. And deep inside, Emma knew this was only the beginning. The days that followed brought small but strange discoveries. At first, Emma thought she was simply being kind to a man who had lost everything. But the more time she spent with Daniel, the more she noticed things that didn't fit the picture of an ordinary homeless man. On the second morning, Emma left an old newspaper on the table. When she returned from work that evening, she found Daniel sitting quietly, the paper spread out in front of him. But he wasn't just reading the headlines, he had circled certain articles with a pen she had left nearby. They weren't random stories either. They were business reports, financial updates, and news about company stocks. Emma frowned as she looked at the paper. "You're interested in business?" she asked. Daniel glanced at her calmly. "I like to keep my mind sharp." It was a simple answer, but Emma couldn't ignore how focused he looked, as though every line in the newspaper meant something to him. She didn't press further, but the thought lingered in her mind. Another evening, when Emma's landlord came by to collect rent, she found herself in trouble. She had been late on her payment, and the landlord raised his voice, threatening to add extra fees or throw her out if she didn't pay soon. Emma tried to explain, but he wouldn't listen. Before she could stop him, Daniel stood up from the couch. His voice was calm but powerful. "That's enough," he said. The landlord froze, surprised. Daniel didn't shout, but his tone carried authority, like someone used to being obeyed. "She said she will pay. Harassing her will not change the date. Show some respect," he added. The landlord, a man who usually bullied tenants easily, suddenly looked nervous. He muttered something under his breath, and left without another word. Emma turned to Daniel in shock. "How did you do that? He never listens to anyone." Daniel only shrugged. "Some people understand strength. Sometimes, all you need is the right tone." It wasn't just his words, it was the way he had spoken. Firm, steady, commanding. Emma couldn't shake the feeling that she had just seen another side of him. Over the next few days, more signs appeared. When Emma's old radio broke, Daniel fixed it quickly, using tools he had found in a drawer. He didn't struggle or guess. He worked with skill, as if he had done such things many times before. When she cooked, he offered to help set the table. But instead of placing things randomly, he arranged everything perfectly. Forks, knives, plates, like in a fine restaurant. Emma raised an eyebrow. "You've done this before," she teased. Daniel gave a faint smile. "Once upon a time." At night, when Emma thought he was asleep, she would hear him moving softly around the room. One evening, she peeked from her doorway and saw him standing by the window, staring out into the dark streets. His shoulders were tense, his jaw set, as if he was watching for something, or someone. Emma's curiosity grew stronger. She wanted to ask questions, but she feared pushing him too hard. She remembered his words, "Kindness can be dangerous." What did that mean? What kind of past was he hiding? One day, as she prepared tea, she noticed scars on his hands. They weren't small scratches but deep marks, healed long ago. They didn't look like the hands of a man who lived only on the streets. They looked like the hands of someone who had once carried responsibility, someone who had built something, or fought for something. "Your hands," she said quietly, without thinking. Daniel glanced down, then quickly pulled his sleeves over them. "Old mistakes," he said shortly, "and nothing more." That night, Emma lay awake in her bed, her mind racing. She thought of all the pieces. The way he spoke, the way he carried himself, his sharp eyes, his knowledge of business, his scars, his quiet authority. Nothing about him added up to the image of a man who had simply fallen into poverty. He was hiding something. She was sure of it now. But what? The mystery didn't scare her, it pulled her in deeper. Instead of pushing him away, she wanted to know more. She wanted to understand who Daniel really was and why fate had brought him to her door. And though she didn't know it yet, every answer she searched for would only lead to bigger questions. Because Daniel wasn't just a man with a hidden past, he was someone whose life was tied to power, wealth, and secrets Emma could never have imagined. Emma's curiosity grew stronger with every passing day. Daniel wasn't just a guest anymore, he was a puzzle. Each small detail about him told her he was not who he appeared to be. She tried to respect his silence, but her heart and mind couldn't rest. One evening, Emma returned home later than usual. As she reached the door, she froze. A voice came from inside her apartment. Daniel's voice. But he wasn't talking to himself, he was on the phone. His tone was different from the calm, quiet voice he used with her. It was sharper, firmer, like a man giving orders. "I don't care what the board says," Daniel's voice carried through the thin walls. "Those shares cannot be sold. Do you understand? Hold the line until I return." Emma's breath caught. Board. Shares. These were not the words of a homeless man. Her hands trembled as she placed the key in the lock and quietly stepped inside. Daniel stood near the window, a phone in his hand. When he saw her, his eyes narrowed for a brief second, then he ended the call immediately. Silence filled the room. Emma's heart pounded. Who were you talking to?" she asked. Daniel slipped the phone into his coat pocket. "Just an old friend," he said simply. "That didn't sound like a friend," Emma whispered. "What are you hiding from me, Daniel? Who are you really?" For the first time since she met him, his calm mask seemed to crack. His jaw tightened, his eyes darkened. He looked at her for a long moment before turning away. "It doesn't matter who I was," he said quietly. "All that matters is who I am now." But Emma shook her head. "It does matter. You're not an ordinary man. You read business reports, you speak like someone in power, and just now you talked about a board and shares. Why are you living on the street if you're someone important?" Daniel's hands curled into fists. For a moment, Emma thought he would refuse again. But then he let out a deep breath, as though he was tired of carrying a weight too heavy for one person. "You want the truth?" he asked, his voice low. Emma nodded. He sat down, his eyes distant, as if he was looking into a past he didn't want to remember. "I wasn't always like this. Years ago, I had everything. Money, success, power. I was the head of a company that people thought would last forever. I built it from nothing, with my own hands. People respected me, feared me, even." Emma's eyes widened. Her chest tightened as she listened. "But the people closest to me," Daniel's voice grew heavier. "They betrayed me. Business partners, friends I trusted, they took what I built and used it against me. At the same time, I lost someone I loved. She walked away when I needed her most. Everything I had built crumbled. And I walked away from it all." Emma swallowed hard, her heart aching at the pain in his voice. "So you left everything behind?" "Yes," Daniel said. "I disappeared. I let them think they had won. 4 years, I wandered, trying to forget, trying to live like I was no one. But power never really leaves you. People still search for me. That's why I stay in the shadows." Emma was silent for a long time, struggling to believe what she had just heard. The man she had fed soup to, the man who slept on her couch, was once a powerful CEO, a man who had ruled boardrooms and commanded respect. "Why are you telling me this now?" she asked softly. Daniel looked at her, his eyes tired but sincere. "Because you've shown me something I thought I had lost forever. Humanity. You didn't help me because of my name or money. You helped me because I was just a man in need. And maybe you deserve to know the truth." Emma felt her heart twist. Part of her wanted to run, to escape the heavy truth she had uncovered. But another part wanted to stay. She had always believed there was more to him, and now she knew she was right. Still, questions burned inside her. If he was truly as powerful as he claimed, was he still in control of that world? Or was he only a shadow of what he used to be? Before she could ask, Daniel stood up and walked to the window again, staring into the night. "Emma, you should be careful," he said quietly. Kindness ties you to people, even people like me. And being close to me, it might bring danger. His words sent a shiver down her spine. That night, Emma lay awake once again, her mind full of questions, her heart full of fear and curiosity. She knew one thing for certain: her life would never be the same again. Because she wasn't just sheltering a homeless man anymore. She was living with a man whose secrets could shake everything she thought she knew. The next few days felt different for Emma. The apartment was the same, but the air carried a new weight. She couldn't look at Daniel without remembering his confession, that he was once a powerful CEO who had chosen to vanish from the world. Emma tried to act normal, cooking meals, going to work, and speaking to him about simple things. But in her heart, she was restless. Every glance, every word from him, reminded her of the mystery surrounding him. One morning, as she left for work, she noticed 2 black cars parked down the street. She thought nothing of it at first, but when she returned home later, they were still there. A strange uneasiness crept into her chest. That evening, Daniel seemed tense. He paced near the window more often, his eyes sharp, scanning the streets. His calmness was still there, but Emma sensed something boiling beneath the surface. Finally, she asked, "Is someone looking for you?" Daniel didn't answer right away. He only said, "People never stop looking for power, Emma. And power never truly lets go." Her heart pounded at his words. Before she could ask more, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. Then came a knock, firm, confident, not like the landlord or a neighbor. Daniel's face hardened. He stood straighter, his shoulders squared, his eyes focused. In that moment, he no longer looked like a tired man in borrowed clothes. He looked like someone stepping back into his true self. Emma whispered, "Who is it?" Daniel didn't reply. Instead, he opened the door slowly. 2 men in dark suits stood outside. They weren't ordinary visitors. Their posture, their expensive coats, and the way they lowered their heads slightly when they saw Daniel told Emma everything. These men respected him. "Sir," one of them said, his voice formal, "we've been searching for you. The company is in crisis. The board cannot agree. They need your decision." Emma's mouth fell open. Her suspicions were no longer guesses. This was the truth. Daniel wasn't just a man with a hidden past. He still had power. He was still in control of something far bigger than she could imagine. Daniel's eyes flicked toward Emma briefly, then back to the men. "I told you before," he said calmly. "I walked away." "Forgive me, sir," the man said. "But without you, everything will collapse. The company, the employees, thousands depend on you." The room went silent. Emma could feel her heartbeat echo in her ears. Daniel looked torn for the first time. 4 years, he had hidden from this world. But now, it had found him again. Finally, he straightened his back, and in that moment, Emma saw the man he used to be. The leader, the decision-maker, the CEO. "Very well," he said firmly. "I'll return. But on my terms." The men nodded, relief washing over their faces. Emma sat frozen as they left, promising to send cars in the morning. She finally whispered, "So it's true. You're still powerful." Daniel turned to her, his expression softening. "Power means nothing, Emma. What matters is what you do with it. I left because I lost myself. But you reminded me what it means to be human again." Tears pricked Emma's eyes. She had taken in a stranger, fed him, given him warmth. And in return, she had uncovered not just a hidden identity, but a man who had lost faith in people, until her kindness reached him. The next day, luxury cars lined the street outside Emma's small apartment. Neighbors peeked through curtains, whispering in shock. Men in suits stepped out, opening the door with respect. Daniel, no longer in rags but in a suit they had brought for him, looked transformed. Yet when he turned to Emma, his eyes were the same, gentle, grateful, human. "Come with me," he said softly. "Not because of who I am, but because you saw me when I was nothing." Emma's throat tightened. Life with him would never be simple, never ordinary. But she realized something important. When she had first seen him on the steps, she hadn't seen a CEO. She had seen a man in need of kindness. And maybe that was why fate had brought them together. She took his hand. The world outside buzzed with questions, but Emma only smiled faintly. She knew the truth now. The man she had once called a stranger was someone extraordinary. And in helping him, she had unknowingly changed both their lives forever.